all-inclusive toilets and stuff like that. Why are these things getting done for this person and I'm over here struggling to challenge unconscious bias because I might have an ethnic name?
Time is money, so spend yours listening to me talk about things that are important to me and my people.
Time is money.
Okay, hello and welcome to this week's Minisode. I'm just getting back into the swing of doing them every week again now because obviously Christmas is over. I have to get on it. I was over the moon at the support, feedback, views, inspiration, conversation that started from last week's Minisode. So if you haven't listened already, please go and listen. It's all about hoarding and growing up in a hoarding house. And there's many levels to that. And I think that might actually be due a part 2, not today, but in general, because there's so many levels to it. And it's not something I've spoken about before. Even when I've put it out, I've had friends who are my actual friends message me and be like, oh my God, I had no idea. And it is something that I don't really talk about because I haven't really come to terms with it until quite recently. If you are someone who's grown up in a house which has been chronically messy your entire life, and as a result of that, you've never been taught or been expected to clean up after yourself, when you become an adult, you just have like a very warped view of what's tidy and what's okay and what's not. It's a hard one. It's a hard one to talk about and hard one to really understand. So I wanted to address it, and I've been overwhelmed with how many people on TikTok. I think the snippet I posted got something like 40,000 views and I got 100 new followers from it. And every day, like, there's new comments on it and stuff. So it's clearly something that's resonating with a lot of people. So I just want to say thank you for everybody who's listening and taking part in that conversation. And I'm really happy that it is speaking to people, because that's, as we know, all I'm trying to do with my minutes. Today's topic is a very divisive one, and I want to do my best to not come across in a way which is disrespectful or too controversial to upset people. This is a topic I wanted to talk about for a while, but I didn't feel like I had the right knowledge about yet, and I'm not totally knowledgeable on it. But the transgender issue. Now, I waited until I'd got my hands on this book and I've got half to 3/4 way through it before speaking on this topic, because I know as soon as I put this out there, as soon as the first snippet, title, syllable comes out, there's going to be a bag of people that are just going to jump on it and be like, oh my God, either for or against or with. It's going to be a conversation starter, which at the end of the day I'm trying to do because that's what the podcast is here for, but I also want to always do it respectfully and not upset people. Let's get into the episode. I, for a long time, have struggled with understanding what it is about the transgender conversation that doesn't sit well with me. I haven't been able to put my finger on it. I've really struggled with the feeling that because, from what I saw, transgender issues affect mainly middle-class white people, I have felt very non-engaged and non-represented in the conversation, which therefore has meant that I've been able to desensitize myself from the realities of what's gone on. I think the first thing to think about and to preface this conversation with is, when you are coming from a position of not being the ruling class, which in this case in the West is a white man, you're always going to be at a disadvantage. And therefore, when a conversation comes in about another group of people who are at a disadvantage, it's very hard not to compare your struggles with their struggles and then be like, well, it's hard for me as well. I can't validate what your struggle is because my struggle is real as well. And I think that's definitely something that happens a lot with the transgender conversation in ethnic minority groups, because we're struggling and fighting for basic human rights sometimes, and then what appears to us from an external view, someone comes along who's decided they don't want to be the gender that they are, and you're like, mate, I'm struggling to get a job because of the colour of my skin. How can we be in the same boat? And again, another thing that's annoying is when there is any kind of disadvantage, people are all lumped in together. It's the same concept as BAME. Like, BAME stands for Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic, I believe. And people get pissed off because you can't class, whole demographic of people who are all so different, and their privileges and their oppressions are so different in the same category, because everyone is different, and there is a total difference in how the world perceives black people versus how the world perceives Asian people, how the world perceives disabled people versus how the world perceives gay people. Like, every person who's a little bit other is perceived differently, so we shouldn't all be grouped in the same category. And I think that's what's happened with the transgender conversation, and that's why particularly people of colour are like, hold up, what are you talking about? We're over here fighting for basic human rights, and you're now coming with this. No, get to the back. And by the back, I mean the queue of us lining up trying to get equality. That's the first thing. And I think if you listen to this podcast and you are a regular listener, that shouldn't really be news to you. Like, you're probably smart enough to gather that as part of the reason the conversation is hard to have. This book has been really good, and I'm really happy I've read it to help me challenge my own biases and my own ignorances. At the end of the day, when we don't know about something, that's the way that we're going to stay ignorant about it, obviously. When I find myself being ignorant about things, I will tend to read something or watch something that's going to open my mind a bit to it. And when I first started to hear, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, about, transgender people, only 4 to 5 years ago, becoming something that was like getting a bit more mainstream, I watched a few Netflix documentaries, and I watched one, Disclosure, and it was about all of the people of colour who were also transgender. And that one really opened my eyes, because I was like, right, I know how hard it is to be anything other than the norm when you are from a minority background by your own community, because of the judgments and the shame and everything else. Like, if you're a woman and you've had multiple partners, even that is quite taboo, let alone coming out and saying that you might be a lesbian or you might be happier in a different body. Like, these things are not normalized in our communities. And so if you're a person dealing with that in our community, like, instantly I'm going to relate, and I'm going to feel like more empathy, and I'm going to naturally engage more in the conversation. So watching that really helped me, and I was like, okay, do you know what, this must be something that affects everybody, and I can only see why this would. Then that changed a bit when I got further on, 5 years on, and it's very mainstream now, I feel like. And, in work, for example, I'm being asked my pronouns. I'm working with people who are non-binary and would like to be referred to as they, them, rather than as he or she. And now there's like added layers, and this is where that thing pricks you, where you're like, I already feel like I'm oppressed. Why is this person getting all of these things done for them? All-inclusive toilets and stuff like that. Why is these things getting done for this person? And I'm over here struggling to challenge unconscious bias because I might have an ethnic name. So that's what was happening there. Like, as transgender conversation came more to the forefront. But reading this book has helped me realise that the reason I've been so irked is because the image that is portrayed of transgenders in general, to me, and again, this is my experience only, please, people that lose it, just remember this is what I'm saying from my reality. I'm not saying this is the reality, this is my reality. From my reality, people that I see that are mainstream and transgender and having these conversations and arguing on TV with the likes of Piers Morgan and stuff are typically white, middle class, and given many privileges already. So I'm now then going to associate transgenderism or the transgender issue with that demographic of people. But equally, the same thing happens in the media with other minority groups. Black people are all gangsters, convicts, in prison, not doing well, the dregs of society. Asian people, Muslims are terrorists, bombers, and Eastern Europeans. There is a stereotype and a negative portrayal of every single ethnic group. And I have seen that and understood that my entire life. So if I can understand that, and I can know that when they report on how dangerous certain areas in London are because of the ethnic makeup of the area, how can I not recognise that the media has another agenda when they're doing that with transgenders? That has really opened my eyes to something. The other thing that has opened my eyes is that this whole thing about people being so concerned about other people's bodies and what other people do with their bodies, often means that the conversation is taken away from the important things. Like when you actually look at the statistics, the amount of people who are transgender, who are ethnic and who are poor is more than any of them who are rich and white, which I had no idea about. That's just brand new information to me. There's a case of a transgender woman really, really badly bullied, worked at Primark, so badly bullied that she actually took Primark to court and won the case. That isn't the media that we read. That isn't something that, I only know that because I read that in a book. I didn't see that on TikTok. I didn't see that anywhere easily accessible, because that's not the narrative that the media want me to understand. They don't want me to humanize this reality. Rather, I keep desensitized from it and carry on judging and be angry and be like, well, why is that important? Why do I have to walk further for a toilet now? That's the kind of conversation they want to keep up. And that's how we keep people ignorant. And you can't ignore, especially if you're a person of colour, you can't ignore the nuances between that and how they put another narrative out there that all black people are going to commit a crime. They're all drug dealers. There's a massive knife crime epidemic. All of these things are narratives put out there in order to oppress another group. And I'm not blind to that. So that being listed out in this book has been really beneficial for me to understand. Do I feel like I'm all the way there and I understand it all and I'm really progressed? No, I'm not going to say that because I've not even finished the book. I'm only 3/4 way through. But I am starting to open my eyes to the narrative that we've been fed versus the reality. I do have my views when it comes to things like what kids are being taught in school, how the whole gender fluid conversation is going. Obviously I have my views on that, but I'm not there in the book yet. So maybe when I get there, we'll be having a different conversation. But for now, I just wanted to make clear that the stance that a lot of people of colour take when it comes to transgender conversation is, this is not for us, this is something we shouldn't talk about, this is something we should look at and really have a strong negative opinion about, because how dare they think that their issues or their dysphoria or their reasons for changing their gender is of more importance than us getting freedom and equality. And first of all, it's not more important. But second of all, our fight for equality doesn't have to close down their fight for their bodies. So that's what I've got so far from the book. I wanted to share that with everyone. I know this will be a conversation starter, and I know some of the opinions and comments will be very negative. And the other thing I wanted to do before I did this podcast was really understand what my view was, because the minute that you jump on and you say something like this that I've just said here, as controversial as transgender rights and the transgender issue, you are sadly putting yourself in a category of people who will be on your side, but only because they're also against everything other as well. So that's like when Rishi Sunak was like saying something about people who are transgender, and he's like, oh, just because you've done the transition doesn't mean you're more of a man if you were born a woman, for example. And lots of people were like, yeah, you know what, he's right. But these are the same people that would call Rishi Sunak the P word. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, it's not that they believe in you, it's just because you're jumping on the bandwagon that goes into a negative stereotype, and certain demographic of people only want that, but they have that negative stereotype about everyone. So you're not going to win any prizes by having an ignorant view to win ignorant people over. And I didn't want what I was going to say to come across as I'm appeasing that group of people, because I'm not. Because I'm very aware that the same group of people who will be anti-trans and go on marches and protests about how disgusting they think trans people are will do the same about black people. And they do the same about Asian people. They do the same about gay people. And I'm not with that. So I'm not trying to appease that group. I'm just speaking my reality and the reality I've come to from educating myself a bit more on this issue. Please tell me what you think. Give me your feedback, give me your reviews, give me your ratings. I'll be back next week, and I'm really happy with how Myers Minutes is growing at the moment. I feel really buzzing. So thank you so much for the support so far. And I would like to remind everybody, in the bio of wherever you're listening to this, I've put a link for, it's called Buy Me a Coffee. And it's a little thing that creators can use. You can donate as much as how much it would cost the person, the creator, me, to get a coffee. And it's just a nice way of saying, like, I really like what you do. I don't have much money to give you right now, but I can stretch to getting you a coffee. So there you go. And it will just mean, and I will just save all of that money, and then I will pay for someone to edit my video, or I might pay for like a new memory card for my camera. You get the gist. So if you want to, that option is there. And I will see you next week. Have a good week, everyone. Bye.